Hey guys, my name is Neel and welcome to Neel Workshop Zone. So in this episode, we're going to be learning about DHTML. So you might be thinking that is this similar to HTML, but well, it is different to HTML. We'll talk about it in a minute. But first, let's talk about what is DHTML. So DHTML stands for Dynamic Hypertext Markup Language. So, DHTML stands for Dynamic Hypertext Markup Language. So, DHTML basically combines it, web technologies of different types of web technologies, like for example, HTML or CSS or, JavaScript, etc. And it kind of makes the web pages more interactive and dynamic. So one important thing is dynamic in this case basically means that it makes the website more like it isn't just a plain website. It can move, it can interact with the user, you can even keep small animations in it. So DHTML, so that is the definition of DHTML. So now you might be thinking that, okay, so you said DHTML includes a lot of web technologies. So what are the web technologies? So it basically includes like 4 web technologies. But before that, let me tell you an example to show you, how DHTML actually works. So if you open a normal HTML web page, you can mostly see, it's normally static. But when you use DHTML, you can create, for example, imagine there's an image and when you click on it, it leads to, a link. Or imagine there's just an animation going on in there, or imagine there's some sort of database or something. So that is all caused by DHTML. So now we're going to learn the 4 web technologies or languages that are actually in DHTML. Okay, so first let's talk about so in the 4 types of like web technologies, first one is HTML 4.2. We have actually talked about HTML over on this channel. So it basically does what an HTML does. It basically designs the website and it basically just used for designing the website. So it is a very important part of DHTML. So if you want to know in context about what HTML is, I actually made a video and even a practical on it. So yeah, you can check them out. So HTML basically works as what HTML works in DHTML. It's basically used for designing web pages, writing the code, etc. Okay, so now let's talk about CSS. Now CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. So Cascading Style Sheet is mostly used for, making the website a lot more attractive. So for example, by adding colors or some sort of effects, etc. So imagine you took a normal website, it'll be plain white background color, there'll just be text normally in normal font. And what CSS does, it kind of changes the background, kind of changes the font of the text, it kind of changes the color of the text. It does a lot of changes to make it a lot more attractive. So that is CSS. So now let's talk about JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a lightweighted object, programming language that is used. Now you might be a little confused because JavaScript seems like Java, which is also another programming language. So you might be thinking are both of them similar. Well, there are actually a lot of major differences. For example, let's take 3 major examples. There are like 7 to 10 examples, but let's take some of the major ones. So, The difference between Java and JavaScript is that Java needs some sort of virtual machine or compiler to run the program. Meanwhile, JavaScript just needs the browser. So, for example, when you take a Java code, you write the Java code, you save it in Notepad, then you go to CMD or Eclipse to directly, compile the program, which makes the application. So you need some sort of other application like CMD or Eclipse to run the program. Meanwhile, in JavaScript, you don't need any, program, other applications. You can just use normal Notepad and it just directly converts from text. So that is one of the major difference between Java and JavaScript. Second major difference is that this is a scripted language and it isn't. And there are a lot of small differences like that, but that is one of the most major difference in both of these. So now let's talk about DOM. It's not called DOM, it's DOM. So DOM stands for Document Object Model. So sorry for handwriting again. So Document Object Model basically takes care of the document stuff. So it basically accesses and manipulates the documents. So it takes care of the documents basically. There's still a lot more stuff about it, but it goes a little too much deep, so I won't be talking about it. But it is a really huge part of DHTML. It really accessing and manipulating the documents. So yeah, that is what DOM is. Not much to know about it, but that is basically what it is. So now let's talk about the differences between HTML and DHTML. Now, there are actually a lot of differences between HTML and DHTML, but I will be telling only about like 2 or 3, some of the important ones. The first is HTML is a programming language. Meanwhile, DHTML is not a programming language. Next is HTML does not need database connectivity. Next is DHTML does need database connectivity. HTML does not need it, meanwhile DHTML does need it. So database connectivity. And another example is HTML is used to make static web pages. Normal web pages we just have some text on it. Meanwhile, DHTML makes dynamic web pages. So if you don't know what that, dynamic web pages, not a web page or a website, it's basically, when you can interact with the website. So as I gave an example before, when you click on a image or a font or anything, it immediately leads to another site. Meanwhile, static is just, as soon as you open a website, there is no buttons or anything, there is just text and that's it. So that is the difference between HTML and DHTML. And one more small thing to note is that when you save a file in HTML, it saves with the format of .html. Meanwhile, DHTML saves with format of .dhtml. So that is also not DHTML. I would say more like DHT, DHTML. So that is how DHTML formats are saved. So that is also another small difference. So that is basically what DHTML is. I could go a little bit more deep, but this is probably it. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out any new videos. And that's all folks, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.